I never thought I'd be standing in my wedding dress, clutching a bouquet with trembling hands, realizing that my own father, my very first protector, had chosen not to walk me down the aisle. He said my younger sister's birthday party mattered more. That sting never left me, and yet, instead of breaking me, it lit something inside of me that no one in that room would ever forget. Because when the music began and I stepped into that hall with someone else by my side, my father's world cracked in front of everyone's eyes. But before I tell you what happened in those unforgettable moments, let me introduce you to the people who made this story what it is. My name is Hannah Miller. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the daughter who had to work twice as hard just to be noticed. My dad, Richard Miller, is a man of strong opinions, stubborn, controlling, the kind of father who believes respect is something his children owe him, but never something he has to earn. To him, appearances matter more than emotions. Rules mattered more than love. And for years, I told myself that if I stayed patient, one day he'd look at me with the same pride he reserved for my sister. My sister, Chloe Miller, is 7 years younger than me. She's always been what you'd call the golden child. Pretty, spoiled, a little reckless, but adored by my father in a way that made the rest of us invisible. If Chloe cried, the world stopped. If Chloe wanted something, Dad would find a way to make it happen, even if it hurt someone else. Growing up, I used to think that maybe, just maybe, when it came to something as important as my wedding, I would finally be the daughter who mattered. I was wrong. My mother, Linda, is gentle, almost timid. She loves deeply, but years of marriage to my father have taught her to avoid confrontation at all costs. She would whisper comfort to me when I cried, but never dared challenge Dad's decisions. I don't blame her for that. Survival sometimes means silence. But it also meant that when my father dropped his cruelest words, they often went unchallenged. And then there's Uncle David, my father's younger brother. He's the opposite of Richard in every possible way. Where my father is sharp and critical, David is warm and steady. Growing up, he was the one who cheered at my school plays when my father didn't come. He was the one who told me, "You're stronger than you think, Hannah," when I felt like giving up. He was the family anchor I didn't know I would one day desperately need. So there I was, on the morning of my wedding, with these 4 people defining the battlefield of my heart. My mother stood beside me, wringing her hands, whispering that everything would be okay. My sister sent me a smug text from her birthday party across town, bragging about how Dad was the life of the party. And my father? He wasn't there at all. He hadn't even called to wish me luck. I'll never forget what he told me the week before. "Hannah, Chloe's 21st only comes once. Weddings can be rescheduled, birthdays can't. You'll thank me later." The cruelty of it was casual, like he didn't even realize how deeply it cut me. That moment changed something inside me. I had spent years craving his approval, years bending myself into shapes just to earn his love. But standing there in my white dress, I realized that his absence didn't have to ruin me. In fact, it might be the very thing that set me free. When the doors to the hall opened, everyone turned, expecting to see me on my father's arm. And when they didn't, whispers rippled through the crowd, cameras lifted, eyes widened. The silence before the music swelled was heavy enough to crush me, but then I felt the steady hand of someone who had always been there, someone who had never made me beg for love or attention. That was the moment I knew. This wedding would not be remembered for my father's absence. It would be remembered for the presence of the man who stood beside me. And when my father finally saw the pictures of us together, he didn't just lose his temper. He lost the image he had worked his whole life to protect. Because sometimes the people who abandon you give you the greatest gift of all, the chance to show the world who truly belongs by your side. When I look back on my life before the wedding, I see a childhood shaped by quiet resilience. I wasn't the daughter who got showered with attention or gifts. I wasn't the one who could stomp her feet and get her way. That was Chloe. She had our father wrapped around her little finger before she could even tie her own shoes. I used to watch him beam with pride at her piano recitals, where she sometimes played only 2 messy songs, while my straight A report cards were met with a distracted nod. "That's nice, Hannah," he'd mutter, barely looking up from his newspaper. It was always like that. Chloe sparkled, and I was expected to applaud from the shadows. My mother, Linda, tried to balance it out in her own gentle way. She'd sneak into my room at night after Dad had scolded me for something trivial, maybe for not cleaning my shoes properly or for disagreeing with him at dinner. She'd sit on the edge of my bed and whisper, "You're special, Hannah." Don't let his temper make you believe otherwise. I clung to those words, even when they felt like drops of water on a fire that never went out. But I wasn't alone. Uncle David was my anchor. He wasn't always around. He worked long shifts as a paramedic, but when he showed up completely. He cheered the loudest at my graduation. He taught me how to change a tire when my dad said that was a man's job, and he never forgot a single birthday. If my father was the storm cloud, David was the sunshine breaking through. By the time I met Ethan Collins, my fiancé, I had built a quiet strength out of all those years of feeling unseen. Ethan wasn't flashy or arrogant. He was the kind of man who listened with his whole heart. We met in the most ordinary way at a friend's barbecue, but from the moment he asked me about my favorite books and actually cared to hear the answers, I knew he was different. Planning the wedding together was supposed to be our fresh start, a celebration of finally building a family where love and respect came first. Ethan's parents adored me, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere without needing to prove myself. That's why I wanted so badly for my father to walk me down the aisle, not because I needed his permission, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be the moment he finally saw me for who I was. When I told him about the date, his first reaction was a scoff. "You really picked October 14th? That's Chloe's 21st. You know how important that is?" I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "Dad, it's my wedding day." We've been planning this for months, but his face hardened. Birthdays only happen once a year. Weddings can be moved. You'll understand one day I remember the air leaving my chest, like I'd been punched. I wanted to scream, "Don't I matter? Don't you love me enough to show up for me just once?" But instead, I just sat there, stunned, watching him walk out of the room like he'd just discussed the weather. Mom tried to soften the blow. She sat across from me at the kitchen table that night, clutching her tea like it might hold the answers. "Maybe we can compromise," she whispered. "Maybe he can come for part of the wedding and then join Chloe later." Her words were desperate, like she wanted to fix something that had been broken for years, but Chloe made it worse. She called me the next day, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Don't take it so personally, Hannah. You've already had plenty of special moments. Dad just wants to be there for me this time. It's not that deep. Not that deep." Those words echoed in my head for weeks. To her, my pain was an overreaction. To my father, my wedding was just another event to shrug off. But to me, it was supposed to be the day I finally felt equal, the day I wasn't second best. I started to feel a gnawing sense of shame. How was I going to explain this to Ethan's family, to my friends, to the people who had traveled across the country to watch me marry the man I loved? How do you tell a room full of guests that your father chose a birthday party over your wedding? That's when the tears came. Late at night, lying in bed next to Ethan, I'd cry quietly, trying not to wake him. But he always noticed. He'd wrap his arms around me and whisper, "Hannah, you don't need him to validate you. We'll make this wedding beautiful no matter what." And he was right. Somewhere deep down, I knew that. But knowing it didn't stop the ache in my chest. Because it wasn't just about the wedding, it was about a lifetime of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like I didn't measure up. As the days crept closer, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Either I let my father's absence define me forever, or I found a way to reclaim my moment. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I couldn't let him steal this day from me. The weeks leading up to my wedding should have been filled with excitement. Last-minute fittings, cake tastings, and happy nerves about walking down the aisle toward the man I loved. Instead, they were filled with dread. Every time I opened my phone, I braced myself for another text from my sister, bragging about her party, or worse, silence from my father, as though my wedding didn't even exist. At first, I tried to reason with him. I called one evening after work, rehearsing what I would say, hoping he would change his mind if I spoke from the heart. "Dad," I said softly, "this is my once-in-a-lifetime day. Please, I need you there. I need you to walk me down the aisle." His answer was cold, almost bored. "Hannah, I already told you. Chloe's party is important. She's turning 21. It's a milestone." "But Dad," I begged, "I'm your daughter too. I've dreamed of this moment since I was little. Can't you do both?" His voice sharpened. "Don't guilt trip me. Chloe needs me more." That's final. I hung up the phone with tears blurring my vision. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I couldn't believe I was begging my own father to show up for me, only to be told I wasn't worth the effort. When I told Ethan, he clenched his jaw but pulled me into his arms. "He doesn't deserve you, Hannah. You're stronger than this." His words were kind, but I could see the anger in his eyes. He couldn't understand how a father could treat his child this way, and truthfully, neither could I. But the hardest part wasn't even his rejection. It was the humiliation. My friends asked casually, "So is your dad excited to walk you down the aisle?" And I froze every time. I'd paste on a smile, my throat tightening, and mumble something vague like, "We're still figuring it out." Inside, I was dying. How could I tell them the truth, that my father would rather get drunk at my sister's birthday party than walk me into my marriage? My mother tried to fix things in her own quiet way. She called me late one night, whispering like she didn't want Dad to overhear. "Maybe he'll change his mind, sweetheart," she said. "Maybe on the day of, he'll realize what he's missing." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew better. My father never changed his mind once it was set, especially not when it came to Chloe. Chloe, of course, didn't make things easier. She called me 2 days after that phone call with Dad, her voice dripping with smugness. "Hannah, don't make this into such a big deal," she said. "It's just walking. You can have Mom or someone else do it. Dad belongs at my party. Everyone will be there, and it'll be so much fun. Honestly, your wedding sounds kind of stiff compared to what I'm planning." My blood boiled. "Do you hear yourself, Chloe? This isn't just walking. This is my wedding. And he's my father." She laughed. "You're so dramatic. Not everything is about you." Her words sliced through me. Maybe she really believed that. Maybe in her world I had always been the background character, and she was the star. As the wedding approached, the weight of it all pressed harder on my chest. Every detail that should have been joyful was tainted. When the florist asked who would hand me my bouquet before the walk down the aisle, I nearly broke down in front of her. When the photographer asked about capturing a father-daughter moment, I swallowed hard, forcing a smile, and changed the subject. The nights were the worst. Lying awake next to Ethan, I replayed every rejection from my father, every smug comment from Chloe, until the tears blurred into exhaustion. Sometimes Ethan would wake and pull me close, whispering, "You're not alone. We'll make this beautiful." His voice was steady, but I knew he wanted to protect me from a wound he couldn't fix. Part of me still clung to a desperate hope. Maybe Dad would surprise me on the day of the wedding. Maybe he'd realize how cruel this was and show up at the last moment. But another part of me, deeper, quieter, knew that wasn't going to happen. The conflict wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about my place in my family. It was about a lifetime of being second best, of never measuring up to Chloe, of begging for scraps of love from a man who never saw me. And now, on the most important day of my life, he was proving once again that I wasn't enough. That realization cut deeper than anything else. My wedding wasn't just missing a father's presence. It was forcing me to confront the truth I'd avoided for years, that I might never have the father-daughter bond I had longed for. And yet, even in the middle of that heartbreak, a spark began to flicker. If my father refused to be there, then maybe, just maybe, I needed to find someone else who truly deserved that honor, someone who had always been by my side. The night before my wedding, I sat in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ivory dress hanging by the closet door. It looked perfect, elegant, everything I had imagined when I was a little girl sketching weddings in the margins of my notebooks. But instead of feeling joy, I felt hollow. That dress was supposed to be paired with my father's arm guiding me down the aisle. Instead, it hung like a reminder of everything I didn't have. I tried to distract myself with last-minute details, but my hands shook every time I picked up the phone. My friends were texting me excited emojis. Ethan's mom was sending photos of flowers being delivered, and Chloe had just posted a string of videos of her party preparations. Balloons, champagne, a giant 21 glowing in neon lights. And right there, at the center of it all, was my dad, grinning, lifting a glass in her honor. That image broke something inside me. I threw my phone onto the bed and buried my face in my hands, trying not to sob loud enough for my mother to hear from the kitchen. That's when I heard a knock on the door. "Hannah?" "It's David. Can I come in?" I quickly wiped my eyes, though I knew my uncle would see the truth no matter how hard I tried to hide it. I opened the door, and there he stood. Uncle David, still in his paramedic uniform, his dark hair mussed from a long shift, but his eyes warm and steady like always. He stepped inside and glanced at the dress. "Wow, you're going to take Ethan's breath away tomorrow." His voice was gentle, but I couldn't even force a smile. I sank onto the bed. "It doesn't matter." "Not really. Dad's not even going to be there. It's humiliating, Uncle David. Everyone's going to see that I wasn't worth showing up for." He sat beside me, letting a heavy silence settle before he spoke. "Hannah, listen to me. Your father's choices don't define your worth. You've been proving your strength your entire life, whether he saw it or not." I shook my head, fresh tears slipping down my cheeks. "But tomorrow, who's going to walk me down the aisle?" "That moment is supposed to be special. It feels ruined." He reached over, gently taking my hand in his calloused one. "Then let me do it." I blinked, stunned. "What?" "I've been there for as many milestones as I could," he said. "I was there at your graduation. I was there when you needed someone to teach you how to drive. I was there when you cried on my shoulder after your first heartbreak. If your father can't see your worth, then let me show you that I do. Let me walk you down that aisle, Hannah. It would be the greatest honor of my life." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from something else, something like relief. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I saw not rejection, but love. Pure, steady love. "You'd really do that for me?" I whispered. He squeezed my hand. "Of course I would. You deserve to be walked into this marriage by someone who sees you, and I've seen you since the day you were born." The dam broke. I threw my arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. The weight I'd been carrying for months seemed to lift all at once. For the first time, I realized my wedding didn't have to be defined by my father's absence. It could be redefined by the presence of someone who had always been there, quietly supporting me. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange mix of nerves and hope. I pictured the look on the guests' faces when they saw Uncle David at my side. I wondered what Ethan would think when he turned and saw me walking toward him with the man who had been my protector for so long. Most of all, I imagined my father's face when he realized he had been replaced, not with just anyone, but with his own brother. The thought didn't fill me with spite. It filled me with strength. For once in my life, I wasn't going to beg for my father's approval. I wasn't going to let Chloe's smug words echo louder than my own. Tomorrow, I would walk proudly into the life I had built, with someone by my side who truly deserved that honor. And in that decision, the hollow ache inside me transformed into something else: defiance, pride, and a spark of joy I hadn't felt in weeks. My wedding was no longer about what I lacked. It was about the love I chose, the family I claimed, and the future I was ready to build. For the first time, I couldn't wait for tomorrow. The morning of my wedding felt like walking into a dream I wasn't sure I deserved. My makeup artist buzzed around me, pinning curls, brushing blush across my cheeks. But underneath the nerves, I carried a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. Because I knew something no one else did. When the music began, I wouldn't be walking down the aisle alone. The ceremony venue glowed in soft light, golden rays filtering through stained glass windows. Rows of guests turned their heads as whispers rippled through the air. Everyone expected Richard Miller to appear proudly at my side, his eldest daughter's hand in his. But when the heavy doors opened, it wasn't my father who appeared beside me. It was Uncle David. The collective gasp was almost audible. Cameras flashed, mouths hung open, and I saw heads tilt in confusion. For one split second, I worried. What if people judged me? What if they thought it was embarrassing? But the moment David gently squeezed my arm and smiled at me, all of that melted away. As the first notes of the piano began, I lifted my chin and stepped forward. Every stride down that aisle felt like a reclamation. Guests whispered, "Is that her uncle?" "Where's Richard?" I didn't care. For once, I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the second-best shadow to Chloe. I was a bride, radiant, strong, and walking toward a future built on love, not absence. Ethan stood at the altar, his eyes widening in surprise as he realized who was walking with me. Then he smiled, wide, proud, emotional. I could see tears glinting in his eyes, and my heart soared. Halfway down the aisle, the moment shattered. The side door slammed open. My father. Richard Miller stormed in, his face flushed, his tie crooked, like he'd rushed straight from Chloe's party. The guests turned, a wave of murmurs following him as he pushed through the crowd. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, his voice booming through the quiet hall. I froze for a heartbeat, my body trembling. But Uncle David kept me steady. He leaned close and whispered, "Keep walking, Hannah. Don't stop." We continued forward step by step, while my father's outrage grew. "You dare replace me? With my own brother?" His voice cracked with fury. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." The guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us and my father. I could feel the tension thick in the air, like everyone was holding their breath. When we reached the altar, my father shoved forward, pointing a finger at Uncle David. "This isn't your place. You're trying to steal my role, make me look like a fool." David turned to face him, calm but unyielding. "No one stole anything, Richard. You gave it away. You chose to miss this moment. I only filled the space you abandoned." The room fell silent. My father's face turned scarlet, his fists clenched. "She's my daughter!" he roared. Finally, I found my voice. My chest pounded, but my words rang clear. "Then you should have acted like it." A real father shows up. A real father doesn't make his daughter beg for scraps of love. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I didn't stop. Years of swallowed pain poured out of me, right there in front of everyone. "I begged you, Dad. I wanted you beside me more than anything, but you made your choice. And now, so have I." Uncle David placed my hand into Ethan's, his expression filled with quiet pride. "She's not walking into this marriage alone," he said, his voice steady enough for everyone to hear. My father stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came. For once, he had nothing to throw back at me. He looked around at the guests, family, friends, co-workers, who were watching not with sympathy, but with judgment. The image of control and authority he had built his whole life was crumbling right before him. He stumbled back a step, shaking his head. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," he muttered, almost to himself. Then, in a burst of rage, he stormed out the same door he had entered, slamming it so hard the walls seemed to shake. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, softly, the pianist began playing again. Ethan squeezed my hand, his eyes full of love. Uncle David gave me one last nod before stepping back into the pews. And just like that, the ceremony continued, not overshadowed by chaos, but strengthened by resilience. I walked into my marriage not as the daughter defined by her father's neglect, but as a woman who had chosen love over bitterness, and who had stood tall in the face of humiliation. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," and Ethan pulled me close, I knew the moment wasn't just about becoming his wife. It was about finally breaking free. The ceremony ended beautifully, despite the storm my father had tried to bring into it. When Ethan and I finally said our vows and kissed, the guests erupted in applause that felt less like tradition and more like defiance. It was as if everyone in that room was silently saying, "We choose to celebrate this love, no matter who tried to ruin it." At the reception, laughter filled the air. The dance floor glowed under fairy lights. The cake stood tall and perfect, and for once I felt completely free. Every time I glanced at Uncle David across the room, I felt a surge of gratitude. He wasn't just the man who walked me down the aisle. He was the man who reminded me I was worth standing beside. But as the night wound down, reality crept back in. I knew this wasn't over. My father's outburst would leave ripples, and I would have to face them. The next morning, while Ethan and I were opening gifts, my phone buzzed with messages. Some were from family members who praised me for my courage. Others, more cautiously, said things like, "I hope you and your dad can make peace." But one message caught my breath. It was from Chloe. She had sent a single line. "You humiliated him. You'll regret this?" I stared at the screen, anger boiling. For Chloe, it didn't matter that our father had abandoned me. All she saw was that I had taken away his chance to control the spotlight. I realized then that she and my father were mirrors of each other, self-centered, dismissive, and blind to the damage they caused. Later that day, Mom called. Her voice was tight, weary, the sound of a woman stuck between two people she loved. "Hannah," she whispered, "your father is furious. He says you embarrassed him in front of everyone." I let out a bitter laugh. "He embarrassed himself, Mom. All I did was let Uncle David walk me down the aisle when Dad refused." There was silence on the other end, then a small, broken sigh. "I know. And I'm proud of you. I wish he could see what I see." That call told me everything I needed to know. My father would never admit he was wrong. He would twist the story to make himself the victim, just like he always had. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to carry the weight of fixing it. The photos from the wedding started circulating on social media within days. Friends and family posted them with captions like, "A beautiful moment," and "Love always finds a way." One picture in particular stood out, me holding on to Uncle David's arm, smiling with tears in my eyes as Ethan waited at the altar. That single image told the entire story without needing words. When my father saw it, I heard from relatives that he lost control all over again. He ranted at anyone who would listen, calling David a traitor, me ungrateful, the whole thing a setup to make him look bad. But here's the truth. He didn't need my help to look bad. His own choices had done that for him. In the weeks after the wedding, I stopped waiting for his apology. I stopped hoping for his approval. For the first time, I felt the freedom of letting go of a weight I had carried since childhood. Ethan noticed the change in me. One evening, as we unpacked in our new home, he kissed my forehead and said, "You seem lighter." And I was. Because I had finally learned a lesson that had taken me 27 years to understand. Love isn't about titles or traditions. It isn't about who's supposed to be there. It's about who actually shows up. Time and time again, Uncle David didn't have to be my father to be the one who walked me into my new life. He had already been there for me in ways my father never was. On my wedding day, that truth was carved into stone. As for Chloe and my father, they went back to their little world of parties and pride, and I went forward into mine, one built on love, respect, and chosen family. To this day, when I look at my wedding album, I don't see an empty space where my father should have been. I see a moment filled with meaning, with love, with defiance, with strength. I see myself finally stepping out of his shadow. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Because sometimes, the people who walk away from you are giving you the greatest gift of all, the chance to discover who truly belongs by your side. And that's my story. A wedding day that should have been defined by heartbreak turned into one of the most empowering moments of my life. I learned that love isn't always about who shares your blood, but about who actually shows up when it matters. If this story moved you, if you felt something while listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand strong when someone you loved let you down? Share your experience in the comments. I promise I'll be reading them. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, and if you know someone who needs to hear a story about choosing love over pain, please share it with them. And of course, if you want more powerful real-life stories that dive into family, love, betrayal, and strength, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the people who stand beside you are the family you were always meant to have.